we were talking about images. Tell me more about this. Like if you were doing this image within your classroom, this is all from the Library of Congress, excellent images and photos that you can bring into the classroom itself. What would you want students to get from this? How would you contextualize this in a lesson?
Well, a lot of my students, you know, when we look at, I'll put out, you know, 20, 30 reproductions of photos. And, you know, have them look at them and say, okay, what are the common themes that you see in it? And it pretty much breaks down to two. It's either a portrait or it's bodies. And I'm like, well, why do you think that it would be these two? And they had to sit there and they pondered it and they talked to each other and they're like, well, the dead don't move. Because they've seen photographs of what look like ghostly images is where people have moved in the photographs. And it looks like the spectral movement. And, you know, they hadn't thought about it. And I'm like, well, yeah. I said, the dead don't move. I said, and, you know, bodies have been gone over and, you know, guns have been picked up, shoes have been picked up, anything that they would have needed, the opposing military or their own troops. Some bodies weren't buried, you know, and the kids were just like, you know, I said they would move them into dramatic poses. I said they could photograph the same body 30 different ways and sell it. And so that was a big topic. We bring a lot to the economics into it and the photography with it and how long. I said, you guys can't even sit still for 5 minutes. Imagine having to sit still for a portrait that long so you don't have this ghost movement. And
I always tell my students that people really weren't depressed with it. You know, when you see all the portraits. It's like, no, I mean, people were similar to us. And I think that's really hard for them to bridge. It's not like they had these static people that lived in the past. But it took a long time to make a portrait, and nobody can smile that long. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe start a day if they have much Botox. But in general, and I found just making that observation immediately reframed students' thoughts of who lived back then. And it makes it more connecting for them in some ways.
When I'm teaching or starting out a lesson and pretty much everything, I try to, especially when it's something that could fall into something that's so lecture-based, I try to put up something shocking or surprising or why in the world would she choose to show us that right now type of image. And this reminds me of something that I would put up first because I think it's so hard, especially for kids, and I teach middle school and high school, for them to remember what the implications of these events were. I mean, death happened in the Civil War, and a lot of it. It was something that changed society. Happened and the Civil War happened, and it was devastating. And I think to allow them to make that connection so early on gives them something to grasp onto for the rest of the time that you're talking about it. Because it's one of those things, as I might pose the question after we discuss this, these people have families? What are the men or women in the background doing? What do you think the story was? How did this happen? Where is this at? And so I think it gives them some sort of background and makes them want to dig deeper and maybe listen to me when I have to get to that point where I do lecture.
Right, exactly.
I need them to buy into me talking for 15 minutes.
A great choice of words, that they have to buy into it. They have to realize that what we're talking about is not just dates, it's not just events, but even though these might be staged, they're people. You know, they were people who lived at that time who might have been very similar in, you know, whatever different context than the people that are sitting within the classroom. And that image, I think, can help connect that. And so for something like this, you could go into all different areas in terms of not just the image itself, but what does it say about Gettysburg? Why was it, photo itself, what was the use of it? And then my students think I'm really odd, but I love, it sounds really odd, I love death. I'm very interested in how people cope with death. Civil War reconstruction, as I said, is one of the areas that I'm interested in. And I'm like, okay, you have the field, you have the battlefield, all these people are dead. Who moves the bodies? who's on grave detail? I'm really asking. Who would be on the grave detail? Would it be, well, other soldiers? Would it be?
Well, I know you always see usually either, you know, African American soldiers or slaves or not, it's at that point not slaves, but, you know, similar to that nature. That's what you always see in the movies and pictures and stuff.
It's very accurate. You know, the individuals who are on grave detail, that was not a job that anybody wanted to be on. You know how hard it is to move a body, especially after it's been sitting around for a while? I used to go to Shiloh oftentimes and see these massive graves. It was not a pleasant position. And so it's interesting to think, okay, who at that time period are you giving one of the worst jobs to, and what does that say in turn about the war itself and what people are fighting for and everything like that? So images to me are very enticing.